Hey folks, and welcome back to another Division 2 video. In this one, I'm going to go over 5 of the best talents you can add to your weapons for increased damage. Let's jump into it. If you're new to the channel, hello, welcome, and if you enjoyed this video or find it helpful, giving it a like goes a long way, and consider subscribing and ringing the bell so you don't miss any future Division 2 videos. With that, let's get into the video. In Tom Clancy's The Division 2, there are a lot of different weapon talents, each with their own uses and strengths, but in this video I'm going to go over my top 5 go-to talents when I'm looking to put together a new damage build or just increase the overall damage of any weapon. And I'll also be throwing in a bonus talent at the end of the video, so make sure you keep watching for that one. Some of these talents are weapon specific, which means they can only be found on certain weapon types, or are talents that I only really recommend using on specific weapon archetypes. So let's start with one of my favourite weapon talents, and one I tend to use on any weapon if I don't already have a plan for the talent, and that's Ranger. Amplifies weapon damage by 2% for every 5 meters you are away from your target. Ranger is a simple and strong damage talent, which has its best effect at medium to long range, ideally on an assault or marksman rifle. There are 2 main reasons I love this talent. First, it's just free damage. Nothing needed to trigger the buff, no requirements to meet, just pure free damage. And second, unlike most damage talents, Ranger doesn't just increase your weapon damage, it amplifies it. If you aren't too sure on the difference between increasing weapon damage and amplifying weapon damage, whenever a talent on a weapon or piece of gear says that it increases weapon damage, this is additive to your current weapon damage, making it an additive damage type. But when a talent says that it amplifies weapon damage, this is multiplicative, which works out to be a much larger increase. This can be quite a complicated topic, so instead of running through how additive and multiplicative damage works in this video, I'll link my video that really breaks down and simplifies the math in the description and in the top right here, for anyone who wants to dig a little bit more into the subject. Now, I can already hear the incoming comments of Optimist is better than Ranger, but my issue with Optimist is you only get to enjoy the fully buffed talent for a fraction of your magazine. If you're unfamiliar with Optimist, weapon damage is increased by 3% for every 10% ammo missing from the magazine. Talents like Optimist have a wind-up, which means the initial burst damage is quite low and builds up the longer you fire your weapon. Personally, I prefer the full burst damage of Ranger that fires at full force the moment you pull the trigger, which means there's no wind-up, it's just pure burst damage. Next up, and this talent is specific to the rifle weapon archetype, we have Rifleman. Landing headshots adds a stack of bonus 10% weapon damage for 5 seconds, max stack is 5. Additional headshots refresh the duration. Like I said, Rifleman can only be found on rifles like the M1A variants, the MK17s and the LVOA, and of course the rest. This talent uses headshots to build stacks up to a max of 5, with each stack giving you an extra 10% weapon damage. This means after 5 headshots, you'll have an additional 50% weapon damage. I actually use this talent as part of my legendary difficulty DPS build, which makes use of the classic M1A. This is because you can build these stacks on a heavy Black Tusk's helmet, which doesn't just destroy the helmet and kill the heavy, but also gives you that 50% weapon damage to pick off the lower tier NPCs, usually in 1 or 2 shots. If you prefer more of a body shot style build, you might want to check out Boomerang as an alternative. This is another rifle only talent. Boomerang. Critical hits have a 50% chance to return the bullet to the magazine. If a bullet is returned to the magazine, the next shot has 40% increased damage. Boomerang is more of a passive talent that does a little bit less damage than Rifleman and also relies on slightly controlled RNG for your damage increase. I say controlled because you can have this more in your favour by having a higher crit chance. Still a great damage talent, but to be honest, it's one I tend to use if I'm feeling a little bit lazy and just want a chilled out farm. This next talent is extremely effective with a high crit chance, high crit damage build, especially if that build uses a weapon with a high RPM or rounds per minute, like assault rifles or SMGs, and that is Killer. Killing an enemy with a critical hit grants 40% critical hit damage for 10 seconds. And it's the perfect version of this talent that makes the Dark Winter name vector such a desired SMG. Killer takes a build that relies on crits and gives it a huge damage buff, usually pushing the crit damage well over or into 200%, which is very strong, especially with a more aggressive run and gun playstyle, or if you're a player that prefers body shots over headshots. This next talent isn't so much a talent to increase your weapon's damage, but a buff that, if played correctly, will increase the damage of your whole build, and that is Finisher. Swapping from this weapon within 10 seconds of killing an enemy grants 30% critical hit chance and 30% critical hit damage for 5 seconds. Finisher is a talent that can only be found on the pistol weapon archetype, and the idea of Finisher being that mid-fight or when an enemy is nearly down, you switch to your sidearm with the Finisher talent to finish them off. Then switch back to your primary or secondary weapon for a huge crit chance and damage buff. Finisher is a great talent to combine with any damage build, but more so with builds that come with a low crit chance. This is because a build that already has a high crit chance won't get quite as much out of the Finisher talent, with the crit chance cap only being 60%. So if a build is at or close to that cap, it will only really take advantage of the 30% crit damage. But if a build has a low crit chance, maybe a damage build that focuses more on headshot damage, this would take a lot more away from the Finisher talent. And finally, we have what has to be one of my favourite talents for assault rifles and LMGs. Not just because it's a huge increase to your weapon's sustained DPS, but also because it's a ton of fun to use, and that is Fast Hands. Critical hits add a stack of 4% reload speed bonus, max stack is 40. Now I know what you're thinking, this talent does not in any way add any extra damage to your weapon, which is technically correct. But what Fast Hands does is increases your weapon's sustained DPS, or damage per second, and it does this by lowering your reload times. While you're reloading your weapon, you're not doing any damage, which means your reloads are affecting and lowering your weapon's damage per second. This means that reload speed is one of the best non-damage attributes for increasing your damage, especially with LMGs, which have large magazines, usually very high damage per shot, but very, very slow reload speeds. Now, I know I said this was my top 5, but here's a 6th bonus talent, and this one I didn't want to include in my main list, because to be honest, it's a little cheesy. And that, of course, is In Sync. Hitting an enemy grants 15% skill damage for 5 seconds. Using a skill or damaging an enemy with a skill grants 15% weapon damage for 5 seconds. Damage increases are doubled while both buffs are active at the same time. Now, this works great with turrets or drones. While your skill is hitting a target and you are also shooting a target, you both get double the damage increase, which means you and your skill get an extra 30% damage. But the trick most players are actually using In Sync for, and this is the slightly cheesy bit, is by combining In Sync with the Crusader shield. As you deploy your shield, that counts as using a skill, which means the moment you deploy your shield and shoot at the same time, you're getting an extra 30% damage for 5 seconds. This can then be re-procced by putting your shield away and then redeploying it, which is very strong, but a little cheesy. And with that, that is everything for this video. If you enjoyed it or found it helpful, give it a like, subscribe, and hit the little bell icon so you don't miss future videos. So how many of these talents do you use, or what is your favourite weapon talent for damage? Let's talk in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.